friends, my name is Angela and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Since starting this channel almost 15 months ago, my reading habits have changed a lot, and one of those areas that's changed is the amount of Australian literature I read. I was inspired to read more Australian books because when I started my channel, I think that's something a lot of you guys said was, I'm really looking forward to hearing you talk about Australian books because there wasn't enough conversation around that. So it kind of made me go, whoa, I need to read more Australian literature. And I'm really proud that I have been doing that. Books that are contemporary, books that are classics, some that I thought I may never be smart enough to read. I've always read Australian stories, but they definitely didn't make up a huge amount of my reading. I kind of leant more towards the UK-based authors or US-based authors, but I'm really pleased that now I've started to really appreciate Australia's literary landscape, and I think it would be safe to estimate that my reading of Australian authors has probably doubled since I started this channel. Over those last 15 months, a number of people have asked in the comments, where do I start with Australian literature? What would be a good jumping off book? And it always will change based on what that person likes to read majority of the time. But today I'm going to share with you a handful of contemporary books that are Australian written, Australian based, books that I love. I think you would be safe to say that every Australian at some point has read one of these books. There is suspense, young adult, historical fiction, literary fiction. This is most definitely not exhaustive, but I hope that no matter what your taste, you will find a book that you would like to take away and read. And something fun that I realized after I had pulled together this list was that all of these books have been made into a movie or a TV series, so you can continue to experience the stories through those. So let's get into it. First up is Looking for Alibrandi, and this is a book that you most definitely, if you're Australian, you most definitely read this in school. I read it when I was in school, my stepdaughter read it when she was in school some years later, and it was published in 1992 and became an instant classic. This book is about a girl named Josie Alibrandi who is a 17-year-old Australian Italian, and she is just coming into her last year of school. She has a scholarship at a wealthy private school. Like most kids, she's trying to figure out who she is and what she wants after school, but she is determined that this final year is going to be the best year of her life. Josie grew up with a single mother and her grandmother who immigrated from Italy. She hasn't had any contact with her father. She feels very suffocated by her mother's family, who are constantly trying to remind Josie of her heritage as an Italian, not just as an Australian. While Josie is constantly trying to minimize her Europeanness to fit in with the other kids at school. Being a nation of immigrants is a large part of Australia's cultural diversity. It's a big part of our history. And I think this book was done in such a great way to discuss how Josie is trying to become her own person while still being a member of an immigrant family that has strong ties to their motherland. It's a coming of age story with wonderful multi-dimensional characters and really quite beautiful and accessible writing. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I read this book over 30 years ago, but I loved it then. I still remember it vividly now, and I think because I was reading it as a 17-year-old with Josie, it meant a lot to me. And not long after, a movie came out which was so well adapted that I highly recommend that as well. But Looking for Alibrandi is a wonderful young adult read of what it means to be Australian when you have ties to other cultures. The next is another young adult book called Tomorrow When the War Began by John Marsden. This was published in 1993 and it is a series of books. I think there are 7 books all up. I've only read the first one. Now, I don't know how many Australians would say that this is a classic, but I think you would be hard pressed to find someone who grew up in Australia and did not read this book. And it's probably one of those books that has become a cult classic. It's a dystopian young adult adventure about a group of friends in Australia. They all decide to go away for the weekend camping. And this group of friends, there are some friends that are very, very good friends, some are just acquaintances, and they go to this remote area near to where they're living in rural Australia to camp for a long weekend. However, when they return back home, they find that the town is deserted. Their houses are empty, there is no power, and there is only static on the radio stations. And what this group of teenagers find is that Australia has been invaded by a foreign entity. We don't actually get an idea of who this is. The town and this part of Australia, it's almost like this is the front line of being invaded. And this town has been taken prisoner, and there are makeshift camps being set up in the centre of town where everyone is being held. So these kids realise that they can either run and hide. They know how to survive in the bush. They could go hide in the bush and just wait this out. Or they could step up and fight back. And that does lead to quite a powerful and exhilarating ride. Like I said, it's the first of 7 books in a series, but you could read this book alone if you didn't want to continue on. It's not vital. I think it is such a great setup. It's incredibly well paced, and it will make the world around you disappear. And I think it really does show how Australian teenagers are relating to each other. And I think it's a really great representation. And the movie was pretty great too. So if you do like this, I would recommend the movie as well. Now, when you start talking about authors that are Australian and are very well known, Bryce Courtney is one of those that comes up time and time again. And usually the book that people might talk about is The Power of One, which is actually set in South Africa. And that book I read in school. I think it was like part of the syllabus to read that book. But today I've chosen to talk about Jessica by Bryce Courtney, which was published in 1998. This story has so many layers and is quite a saga. The story is set in the harsh Australian bush at the onset of World War I. Jessica is the apple of her father's eye, the pride of her father, and they are on a struggling farm. But one day the peace on this farm is disrupted by a terrible murder, and Jessica manages to save a person from a lynch mob. There is a rivalry between Jessica and her sister who love the same man, and this will continue on for years and years. And at the end of the day, this story is a really gripping tale of love and resilience and sacrifice. And I think it really captures the harsh realities for people at this time in Australia. There was one little blurb I came across that was interesting, and it said that Courtney somehow managed to weave the social satire of Jane Austen and the dark forces of Thomas Hardy. It's a real saga. It has a lot of secrets, and I think it is most definitely up there as a wonderful book if you love those sort of stories. Now, this book, The Dry by Jane Harper, has quite a cult following, and chances are if you've read an Australian book that was published recently, it may have been this one. It was published in 2016, and it was Jane Harper's debut novel, which is astounding. But it is perfect for people that love a slow burn and an atmospheric mystery. So this is the first of 3 books. There is a trilogy around a forensic detective named Aaron Falk. Aaron is based in Sydney. He is working for the police, the federal police, I think. And he goes back to his hometown, which is in the middle of a long, long drought. They have been suffering. And he goes back because there is a funeral for his best friend from childhood who has died. But not only has his friend died, his friend's family, his wife and his children have all been slaughtered in their home. Aaron is absolutely not welcome in his hometown. He clearly left under some pretty suspicious circumstances, which we don't know about at first. But there are secrets upon secrets, and Luke's parents ask Aaron to look into a couple of things because of his forensic detective background, and he starts to uncover a few things. But in that process, he is having to reckon with his youth and how he and Luke shared a secret that they never thought would come to the surface again. It is a page turner, and like I said, it is one of 3 books. The second book is Force of Nature, which I didn't find as good as The Dry, but it was fun nonetheless. It's about 5 women who go hiking in the bush and only 4 come back. And the next one, or the third one, is Exiles, which I have not yet read. This is one of those situations where it's the last book in the series and I want to be very cognizant of that, so I have not read it. I don't want to ruin it, so this will be something I'll read soon. And the last book I want to recommend as a really great Australian story is The Secret River by Kate Grenville. This was published in 2005, and it is historical fiction, and it is very, very hard to read at times because of the themes within it. But I do think it's an important book for a lot of people to read. I wanted to include this because it is quite highly regarded because it discusses Australia's convict past and the treatment of Aboriginals at that time. It was also shortlisted for the Booker and for the Miles Franklin Award. So we start with William in the early 19th century, and he is a boatman on the Thames. He has lived a life of poverty and petty crime, and through some circumstances he is set to hang for a crime. But instead he is deported to Australia with his wife and his children in tow. This is where the new penal colony has been set up in New South Wales, and that is the destination that William has. So he is just planning to live out his sentence, and then he and Sal and their family will make their way back to England. But eventually William realises that there may be a better opportunity for them to stay in Australia because there is land up for grabs. This was a time when immigrants were just taking pieces of land and settling on them. And this is what William decides to do along the Hawkesbury River. This action, when you look at it from today's lens, it really does examine Australia's past in how Aboriginals were treated, and they were moved from their lands, and they were seen as a race of people to be eradicated. It was really confronting to read this, but it is a part of our past. They were seen as a threat. They were seen as people that didn't own the land because they didn't have fences and farms, and they didn't treat the land the way that Europeans treated their land. So it was seen to be unoccupied. And this relationship that Indigenous Australians had with the land was difficult for people like William and other immigrants to understand. Kate Grenville's writing is really quite poetic, and it is really very compassionate, and she does treat this subject matter with a lot of respect. I think she does it really, really well. It is confronting, but it also brings a lot of themes up. The title of the book is from a lecture in 1968 from an anthropologist, and that lecture had a line that a secret river of blood runs through Australia's history. And it's referring to that often brutal past that we have when Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians were confronted with each other. This book addresses a lot of those themes of the cultural clashes, moralistic issues, and it has some horrible characters that do horrible things. It's hard to recommend, go out and read this book, but I think it is an important story to be read because it is a pivotal moment in our history as a nation, and it's a crucial piece of literature that I think everyone should read at least once. At least every Australian should read it. So those are 5 books that I would recommend, and hopefully there is something in there for you, something that you can pick up and you can learn a little bit about Australia or Australians and participate in what is quite a fascinating literary landscape, I think. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon. Bye.